Don't leave me hanging. It's go time.
Hey everybody, this is Josh, and I hope you're having a great day. This wonderful game of StarCraft 2 should make it even better. We've got WhiteRa as the red Protoss up here in the top left corner of Shakuras Plateau, and his opponent once again is MaNa, the yellow Protoss down here in the bottom right corner of that very same map, and this is actually the updated version of Shakuras Plateau. If you look right here, you'll notice there are no destructible rocks. Instead, there is a sheer cliff to the ground below, so that of course means they are playing on the new updated version. This is the first high-level game that I've actually been able to cast on this map, and I'm excited to bring it to you guys. WhiteRa and MaNa are two very, very good European Protoss players. We're kind of checking in and seeing the state of high-level PvP at the moment. First game didn't really reveal too much. We saw a 4-gate rush fail against a 3-gate robo, basically due to the timing of that first immortal, and MaNa actually just held out long enough to stay alive for that first immortal. Once the second immortal came out, it was basically game over. At that point, WhiteRa was far behind, and you know, in this matchup, you've got a sort of build order rock, paper, scissors. It can happen. If you are doing sort of an off-the-wall strategy and your opponent 4-gates you essentially just lose. So it's very important. Scouting is extremely important. Unit control is at the utmost value. If you have an early altercation with like 2 zealots, 2 sentries, 2 stalkers against the same thing on the other side, and you come out of that fight with 2 units still alive, your shields will regenerate. They can join your army later on. Any tiny victory that you can get in this matchup will lead to a bigger, badder army in the mid-game and the late game. So we'll see if Game 2 of this best of 3 for the Black Dragon League between WhiteRa and MaNa has some different elements from the first game, or if we're just going to see more 4-gating. And let's take a look now, since this game is starting to get underway, if anything out of the ordinary has happened. It looks like WhiteRa and MaNa actually are both just doing the very standard Protoss build still. MaNa is actually a few seconds ahead of WhiteRa. Did he do anything differently to cause that? Doesn't look like it. That's kind of surprising, actually. WhiteRa did get a second pylon as well. MaNa did too. Both players sticking to the same build order, but MaNa seems to be just a few seconds ahead. And we've got a scouting probe in WhiteRa's base, checking things out. Like I said, not going to find anything too surprising, but look what he's doing here. Okay, so you may not have ever seen this before. What MaNa is doing, he's taking his probe, he's starting to mine from a certain patch, but he doesn't let it finish. He's just rejecting the probes from WhiteRa. If there is a probe already mining a mineral patch, your probe's AI will actually bounce it to another mineral patch instead of mining off of the same node. So MaNa just delayed the mining of WhiteRa by several, I don't know, milliseconds, but still slowed him down nonetheless, and it can be very frustrating for you if someone is very, very good at this. It means that your probes are just bouncing around, not doing anything, and it can kind of make you a bit frustrated. So interesting move there by MaNa. Surprised to actually see him try to do that there in this early game. But now we have WhiteRa getting his second gateway. Warp Gate Tech is being chrono boosted, and he is going to drop a second assimilator here. MaNa, on the other hand, does not have a second gateway coming yet, so I'm going to be interested to see if he's going to continue on with a different build order here. We've got gateways 2 and 3 coming along at the same time. WhiteRa also adding on gateway number 3 just a little bit afterwards. So both players still very right on with their timings. If you look at this production tab, it almost looks like a Terran versus Terran, where you see the same build order all the way up to the 5-minute mark. And in fact, we did just pass the 5-minute mark, so these guys are right on target. Let's look at Control A and see the army supply versus worker supply. It looks like WhiteRa is just barely ahead on probe count, but their armies are pretty much identical, so we'll go ahead and hide that. And back in WhiteRa's base, he's getting a robotics facility, so he did not like the fact that his 4-gate didn't quite work out for him on Xel'Naga Cavern, so he's just going to join MaNa in the 3-gate robo strategy. Here we see MaNa doing the exact same thing as well. Neither player expanding. They're both most likely going to be cranking out a ton of units. We'll see which player actually ends up being the aggressor. With this 3-gate robo, you can do any number of things. You can get an observer out quickly to spy on your opponent. You can get a couple of immortals out to counter any kind of 4-gate rush. Basically, the immortals destroy stalkers quite efficiently. If you have 2 or more immortals, it can stop a warp gate rush very well, as we saw on Xel'Naga Caverns. Or you can gun it straight for Colossi, and I think both players actually might be looking to do that. WhiteRa is dropping a pylon here in the back of his natural, which is kind of an interesting spot. We'll see if that actually makes a difference later on. Right now, though, both players still just sticking very, very close. If you see the supply up here in the top right, you'll see that MaNa is actually just barely ahead on supply. And again, not sure if that's going to make a huge difference, but we see it is because he's got more army, actually. So that is actually a surprise. Army supply says it's 17 against 17, but clearly we can see that MaNa's got more units total. So that actually is kind of interesting to me. He's got 2 more zealots, 1 more sentry. Everything here is 2 supply, so he should be ahead. I'm not sure what's going on with that. But now we see an immortal getting started here. Oh, it's actually done. First immortal is done for, who was that, WhiteRa? So perhaps that was counted in the army value. I'm not sure if units in production count as army or only units that are already completed. I guess it's in production since you do need the supply to actually get them started, so that would explain it. Immortal out for WhiteRa. He is getting his robotics bay now. MaNa actually went for the bay first and then an immortal. So we'll see if that makes a difference. Again, I have no idea what's going to make a difference here because everything comes down to micro, and here we have our first little glimpse of a micro battle. See a lot of force fields going down from MaNa just to chase away these 2 stalkers. End up not paying off because the stalkers did actually manage to escape. So they are going to go safely back to their natural. Army supply should still be in MaNa's favor. Yes, it is. Let's look at units lost. There is no control L for that, unfortunately, but it looks like WhiteRa actually lost a lot of units there. Sorry if I missed that, but right now MaNa looks like he wants to drop a Nexus here at his natural, so he's going to be expanding a bit after WhiteRa. WhiteRa already has a 3rd assimilator up, so he's going to be cranking out that gas, trying to get some more research for his Colossi. I don't think extended thermal lances have even begun for either player yet. No, they have not, and as I say that, WhiteRa gets his started. And is he chrono boosting it? No, not yet. He does have some saved up, though, so he could actually do that. He's chrono boosting out his units instead, which is a good decision. Check out this new Xel'Naga tower. There used to be destructible rocks here, and this visibility blocker actually did not used to go all the way around the Xel'Naga tower. It was just on one side, so they've changed the terrain there a slight amount. MaNa's going to run through the middle here. WhiteRa's got a probe about to basically eat it. Stalker should be able to catch that probe and kill it off, but WhiteRa is there to intercept. Observer overhead for MaNa as well. Not really sure what that's going to actually achieve for him, as WhiteRa does have the larger army out of these 2 small contingents. MaNa's going to run all the way back home, it looks like, where he can join his immortal Colossus. Lots of zealots, a couple of sentries here for some force fields if need be, and more zealots being warped in right now. So let's look at harvester count just for a second. We see WhiteRa's ahead 46 to 41, not bad at all. MaNa's still ahead in army by 13 supply now, so that is getting tipped further and further into his favor. We'll see if that actually makes a difference. I've said that about 10 times now, so I'm going to try to stop. WhiteRa has 2 Colossi now, with that little tier 1 mix and an immortal. Basically looking very, very similar to MaNa's own composition. The only difference being that MaNa panicked a little bit and made a bunch of zealots that he may not have needed to. We'll go back to production tab. Thermal Lance is about to finish for WhiteRa. They are about 60% done for MaNa. We see a forge and a 2nd robotics facility coming now for WhiteRa, so he's going to get some upgrades rolling and get another Colossus in production most likely. I don't see a 2nd robotics facility for MaNa anywhere, so he's going to want to build one just to be able to keep up with that Colossus production, as that can really determine who wins these games in these Colossus versus Colossus battles. Force fields can be quite pivotal as well. If you make force fields, obviously your opponent, if he has Colossi, can stomp them out, but that is forcing him to take some actions, and that's time when those Colossi are moving that they are not shooting, so it can still be quite beneficial to have a lot of force fields during these big engagements with lots of gateway units and lots of Colossi on both sides. We see 2 Colossi churning out at a time. Another gateway drop for WhiteRa. 2nd robotics facility finally being made for MaNa. Let's look at, actually see this +1 weapon upgrade for WhiteRa. No forge has been built for MaNa either, but I believe the army supply should still be... Oh, it's actually in WhiteRa's favor now. Once he got that 2nd robotics facility, now let's hide this little panel and watch the battle in its full glory. We see force fields going down. Like I said, they can be very helpful. You see those zealots whacking away at that immortal and actually finishing it off. MaNa is warping in more zealots to the front line, but WhiteRa does have the Colossus advantage right now. 3 against 3. Number 3 just showed up for MaNa as I was saying that, so now WhiteRa on the ropes a little bit. I'll be very surprised if he's able to hold this for very much longer. I'm going to just highlight the health bars here for everything. WhiteRa does have a fresh Colossus out now. MaNa is warping in 3 more Stalkers for his side of the fight. WhiteRa down to only a single Colossus. MaNa only left with a single Colossus as well as 4 Stalkers and a Zealot. Might be able to take out a Pylon, but now WhiteRa getting another Colossus on the field and 3 more Stalkers warped in. Looks like he is going to force MaNa back to his forward Pylon area here. So WhiteRa actually hanging on there, not bad at all. Let's look at the units lost tab. See, WhiteRa actually has lost a lot more than MaNa. But now MaNa is going to start retreating, so we'll go ahead and pull up the minimap once more and just check things out. Supply for both players still very, very, very even. Army value favoring WhiteRa and worker value favoring WhiteRa, so he's doing quite well after that big attack from his opponent MaNa. WhiteRa has an observer overhead checking out all this stuff from MaNa. And yeah, just a lot of Zealots, Stalkers, and Colossi for MaNa. We've got more coming from all the way across the map, so WhiteRa is actually in sort of a better position here because he can reinforce so much faster with these robotics facility units if MaNa continues this assault. WhiteRa is actually taking a 3rd base now as well. MaNa's trying to do something sneaky over here with a Pylon, but I don't see how that's going to benefit him very much. And one thing to note is WhiteRa does have +1 weapon upgrades. MaNa's still sitting at 0-0. That could actually turn the tide of this huge battle that we've got going on here. Right at the ramp, we've got 3 Colossus for both players, 4 Colossus for both players, excuse me, but WhiteRa still has all the gateway units still alive, and he is going to walk right past this Pylon. Is he actually going to continue chasing, or will he try and stop this Pylon from warping things in? I see a few more Zealots warping in, trying to kill off these Colossi, not actually managing to do anything, and the Pylon is going to go down. So we have 5-1-0 Colossi marching through the middle of the map, and MaNa retreating with 4-0-0 Colossi here. Got to favor WhiteRa once again with his army composition and his upgrades. Nexus for WhiteRa about to complete, so he will be on 3 mining bases here soon. 2 more assimilators coming up as well, so he can continue this very rapid Colossi production. MaNa creating, actually both players creating 2 Colossi at a time. We see the supply favoring WhiteRa up there in the top right, 124 to 108. MaNa just chilling back in his main. Getting more Colossi. He's got 5 warp gates total that he can't actually use because he is very close to broke. WhiteRa does have 5 warp gates of his own, but he does not have any forward pylons except for here in the middle of the map. He may actually want to continue on with that. He does have an observer floating around, making sure MaNa's not expanding, but it looks like MaNa does not have the minerals to drop another Nexus anytime soon anyway. And WhiteRa should be quite comfortable with that fact. Harvester count now showing 63 against 56 for WhiteRa. He's sitting at 146 total against 121 total. Armor +1 being researched out of that forge now for WhiteRa, and MaNa still does not have a forge of his own. He is getting that 3rd Nexus now, but it might be too little too late as WhiteRa looks like he is preparing for a pretty big assault here. He's got, how many Colossi is this? Holy crap. So let's look at the unit tab. We see 8 Colossi for WhiteRa, 7 for MaNa. Red Army looking to be quite formidable here with its upgrades as well. Armor going to be finished here soon. Perhaps WhiteRa is going to wait for that to finish, and no, as soon as I say that, of course, WhiteRa begins to move with absolutely everything. I'm going to hide the tab once again, pull up health bars, see what happens here. Huge concave here for MaNa. Every single Colossus is firing. That cannot be said for WhiteRa as he loses 2 Colossi there at the top. Now we've got everything firing from WhiteRa, and he's just going to mow through here with his +1 weapon upgrades. That is going to help so severely. All these probes transferring here get caught and destroyed, absolutely disgustingly evaporated there, and MaNa says, Colossus Wars. Doesn't seem to be too happy with his performance there on the map, says GG, well played. So we are going to go into Game 3 now. WhiteRa taking that one on the new Shakuras Plateau, cross-position PvP. Look how many Colossi are left here at the end of this. That is just so many. Look at the unit tab, 9 Colossi against just 1. Of course, that guy was going to melt extremely quickly had this game progressed any further. So now let's go into Game 3, see what happens next in our up-to-date PvP glimpse at high-level play.